Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. We are in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 17. We're continuing with Absalom's insurrection, attempting to overthrow his father David. Verse 1. Ahithophel said to Absalom, I would choose 12,000 men and set out tonight in pursuit of David. I would attack him while he was weary and weak. I would strike him with terror, and then all the people with him will flee. I would strike down only the king and bring all the people back to you. The death of the man you seek will mean the return of all. All the people will be unharmed. This plan seemed good to Absalom and all the elders of Israel. But Absalom said, Summon also Hushai the Archite, so we can hear what he has to say. When Hushai came to him, Absalom said, Ahithophel has given this advice. Should we do what he says? If not, give us your opinion. Hushai replied to Absalom, The advice Ahithophel has given is not good this time. You know your father and his men. They are fighters and as fierce as wild bear robbed of her cubs. Besides, your father is an experienced fighter. He will not spend the night with the troops. Even now he's hidden in some cave or some other place. If he should attack your troops first, whoever hears about it will say there's been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom. Then even the bravest soldiers, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt with fear, for all Israel knows your father is a fighter and that those who with him are brave. So I advise you, let all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, as numerous as the sand on the seashore, be gathered to you, with you yourself leading the men to battle. Then we will attack him wherever he may be found, and we will fall on him as dew settles on the ground. Neither he nor any of his men will be left alive. If he withdraws to a city, then all Israel will bring ropes to that city, and we will drag it down to the valley, until not even a piece of it can be found. Absalom and all the men of Israel said, The advice of Hushai the Archite is better than of Ahithophel, for the Lord had determined to frustrate the good advice of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster on Absalom. So Absalom is actually seeking advice now. He's asking for good advice from good advisors. And he has two of the best of Israelites' advisors with him. One that was part of the conspiracy, and one that has said he's going to join Absalom and give him good advice. Ahithophel was the craftier of the two. And he had joined Absalom early in this process, had helped crown him king, had been with him, and he had the right idea that while David was down and weary, strike quickly with elite soldiers and try to go in and do a surgical strike, not kill a bunch of people, but only kill David. And only as few people as it took to get to David. And when you strike David down, the rest of the country will fall in line because they're going to want a king. And if the old one's dead, then the new one has to be king. And that's a reasonable strategy. And if they had done it, particularly in the depressed mood David is in right now, it might have worked. Hushai knows that. He's been with David that evening, and he knows the condition of things and knows that David's still not thinking as a military commander. But he also knows that if he gives David time, he will become that raging military commander, and he'll get his act together. And so he sets, hey, that's a bad idea. You know they're good soldiers, and they were the best elite. You didn't, 12,000 against them might have not been a fair fight. If they'd been together and already grouped together, David probably could have won against 12,000. And Hushai basically says they're already together and they're prepared for it. And if you send 12,000, they're going to get slaughtered. And then it's going to sound like you're losing the war, and that'll be worse for you than waiting. And so, call all Israel together. You've got the advantage in numbers. Get everybody together, and then, overwhelming force, and you'll win. And that sounds like great advice. Because it does sound like David is that great military commander that knows how to organize his men. He has the best men with him. And it's going to be tough to take him. And it's going to be tough to take him when they are fighting. And once David organizes, he's going to be a tough. Let's face it, he's conquered all the people around. He's got this empire set up. He started with, we can barely defend our borders, and we routinely have raids, and he's got this empire that stretches the Euphrates River. It stretches, down to the Philistines, but he's beat the Philistines back to within their own territory, and they're not venturing out anymore. And he's controlled the backside around and effectively controls trade with Egypt. And he's got allies or conquered everybody up to basically Turkey. And everybody's either an ally or a subjugated enemy all over that territory. Yeah, you don't get much more serious than a man that's done that in one lifetime. He's a good fighter. And Absalom knows that. And the advisors with him know that. They know what David's capable of. And they've just heard from Hushai that, David, he's getting his men together. He's getting organized. He's not going to be with them, but he's going to have them ready. And if you attack, you're going to be slaughtered. And you don't waste your best men. You get everybody and you get ready. And that sounds like better advice. And Scripture is very clear there that God was doing this so Absalom would be defeated, and that the wrong man would not be sitting on the throne, that the man after God's own heart would win, and that Absalom, who was not after God's own heart, was after his own authority and own power and own greed, would lose. And he followed the course that would be less successful. And so that's what they agreed to do. Verse 15. Hushai told Zodok and Abithiar, the priest, Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel to do such and such, but I have advised them to do so and so. Now send a message immediately and tell David, do not spend the night at the fords in the desert. Cross over without fail, or the king and all the people with him will be swallowed up. Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying at En Rogel. A servant girl was to go and inform them, and they were to go tell King David, for they could not risk being seen entering the city. But a young man saw them and told Absalom, so the two of them left quickly and went to the house of a man in Bahurim. He had a well in his courtyard, and they climbed down into it. His wife took a covering and spread it out over the opening of the well and scattered grain over it. No one knew anything about it. When Absalom's men came to the woman at the house, they asked, where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? The woman answered him, they crossed over the brook. The men searched but found no one, so they returned to Jerusalem. After the men had gone, the two climbed out of the well and went to inform King David. They said to him, set out and cross the river at once. Ahithophel has advised such and such against you. So David and all the people with him set out and crossed the Jordan. By daybreak, no one was left who had not crossed the Jordan. So David's spy network works for him. Hushai tells the priest, who have figured out their sons can't be seen coming and going out of Jerusalem, but they have them stationed outside of Jerusalem. They send a servant girl out. She advises things. Now, you notice they're playing a game of gossip. By the time the word gets there, part of it's been left off, part of it's been forgotten. The servant girl doesn't understand the importance of everything she got told. It's probably the weak spot, but we really don't know that. The priest may not have understood it, may not have told her everything. She may have forgotten part of it. The sons may not have understood it and may have forgotten more of it. But the essential gets to David. He doesn't need to stay at the fords at the Jordan, because if he does and Ahithophel's better advice gets followed, he'll be in a real hurt. And if he makes it across the Jordan and where he's hard to get to, he can't be hit with a surprise military attack, and it will have to be a large force gathered, which will take time, and David can take time to organize his forces and organize his people and recruit his people. And David probably is beginning to get the gravity of the situation, understand what's going on, and knows Ahithophel's ability to plan and give a good plan. And he knows, okay, if that's what Ahithophel said to do, I got to defend against it. And if he got told, or if he didn't get told, that Hushai's other advice was to gather all Israel, he would surmise that there was another plan possible, but he got to defend right now against the current plan. And so he does cross the Jordan. He gets safely out of where a quick strike force could take him down. And, lots of the interesting details, the spy versus spy stuff. The two sons of the priest are, running to tell David. They hear that Absalom's men's chasing them. They have to hide in a well and get hidden. The people that are hiding them help keep them hidden. Tell the people chasing them, oh yeah, they were here and they went on off that way. Go follow them. And then they don't find them because, well, they're not out there, and they come back and, they don't get found. God's orchestrating that kind of detail, and that's the kind of thing people like to hear. I mean, it's cool. The thing is, it was the kind of thing that you would expect in that day and time. People that supported David are going to protect his people and hide them, and they're going to be creative and make it such that it doesn't look like they have them. Even if their house got searched, who searches in a well? And particularly one you can't see, because it looks like they're drying grain on the middle of the courtyard, not covering up a well. And who looks under a pile of grain in the middle of the courtyard? It's not that deep. You can see that they're not in it, And so, who does that? And so if you don't know the courtyard that well, and they won't know, they don't know that kind of detail about the country. Nobody does, basically. Probably even David's men didn't know it until the two sons of the priest used that tactic. And so, they get away with it. And people are supporting David. The hearts of the country are not really after Absalom. Some do, some don't. Some are after King David, some are after Absalom. Some just don't like the whole clan of Jesse. They would just as soon somebody else be in charge. And if that means David has to go and his son has to be in charge, well, they might get something out of that, or Absalom might be easier to overthrow than David. And, there's all kinds of things going on in the politics. But David has to survive the night. He has to survive a couple of days. And the good intelligence he gets leads him to actually start thinking militarily and start putting it together. And the single piece of actionable advice he gets is cross the Jordan tonight, get safe, get where it's hard to attack you. And he does so. And that causes him to think, get some rest, and then organize his people so that when they do get attacked, they're prepared. And that probably also galvanizes his people to start thinking, it's real, we're fixing to fight. And they're going to call in their allies and their help. And people are going to start knowing we got to defend the king. Verse 23. When Ahithophel saw that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out for his house in his hometown. He put his house in order and then hanged himself. So he died and was buried in his father's tomb. Ahithophel didn't have the guts to stay with the program when he wasn't in charge. I mean, just because somebody's not following your plan is not a plan to commit suicide. You stay around the court, you continue to offer improvements to the plan, even if you don't think it's the best plan, you stay in the fight and you try to make it win anyway. I think deep in his heart, he knew what he had done was wrong and that God was thwarting his quick plan and that David would win. And he didn't want to face the consequences of that. He didn't want to appear to be rebellious to his king. And so he went home and committed suicide. When it says he set his house in order, he prepared his will, gave away what he wanted to give away, so that when he died, his household would continue to function without him. He put somebody in charge, and then he committed suicide. And he was buried. And his advice is no longer in the kingdom. So one of the traitors is dead. One of the key traitors, the one that would actually be some brains. And unknown to Absalom, he's just lost the brains in the operation, that Hushai is actually against him, and his advice is bad advice. And so if he leans on Hushai's advice, he's going to get himself killed. Verse 24. David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. So this has been a while. If Absalom's got all the men of Israel, that probably took several weeks. David gets to one of his strongholds where he has a lot of support. He's also been able to send messengers throughout Israel, and the people who are going to support the king over the Upsur have joined him. And so he's got a sizable army now, probably comparable to Absalom's. The country sized it up. Every clan has decided which one they're going to support, or if they're not going to support either one, and sent people accordingly. And Absalom now has this big army, and he crosses the Jordan to go confront his dad. He's actually leading an army in battle. He's being king-like. Good for him. Of course, God decides the battle. Verse 25. Absalom had appointed Amasa over the army in place of Joab. Amasa was the son of a man named Jether, an Israelite who'd married Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, and the sister of Zeruiah, the mother of Joab. The Israelites and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. So Amasa is a member of the clan, well, indirectly. He married into the clan, and he is a good general. We'll learn more about him later, but he married one of Joab's aunts. So they're cousins. They're part of the same clan because he didn't stay with his clan. He went with David's clan. And during the politics of that day, that makes sense to do that. Sorry about that. And Amasa is going to be a good general of Israel. But by supporting Absalom, he is going to make some fatal mistakes with his career. He probably doesn't have much choice. The whole army did not follow David. Absalom is calling up the army. And if he's been anointed king, it appears legitimate. And so he needs a general. He needs somebody to lead. And he appoints the best man he can find that hasn't just gone and stayed with David. Most of the very important military leaders are with David. And they're pulling in their politics to bring in their troops that are loyal to them because they're loyal to David. So Absalom's got to get a general. And he reaches into his clan and gets the next best man, Amasa. He's actually a very good general. And the two places the two armies are at are about 40 miles apart, and they're both in good country for armies to fight. Gilead is cattle country. Mahanaim is sheep country. The difference is very minimal as far as armies go. It's more about what grows there well and which animal does better there. They're both largely plains covered with low-growing plants, not a lot of trees. There's some hills, there's some streams. You can get water there. You can have some sort of tactical advantage from the top of a hill, but you're going to have to cross the valley and attack the next hill, and but it's not craggy or hilly. It's basically rolling hills. It's not a lot of really steep. You don't have many cliffs. You don't have many gullies or anything like that. It's not really rough territory. It's easy to do warring. And both men have picked that, and it's not heavily populated territory. And the population that's there is used to being mobile. They're used to following their sheep around or following their cattle around. And if I owned land in Gilead or Manaheem, uh, and I heard the armies were coming, I would get my sheep, I would get my cattle, I would get my wife and my kids and my tents and the servants and say, guys, let's go over there. The army's coming here, let's go there. And I'd get out of Dodge. And I think both of them are kind of counting on that the civilians will be out of the way. And they can do their little war, and when it's over, they can leave, and the real landowners can come back and do what they do. And so it's kind of an ideal spot for them. It doesn't hurt the country particularly. It's not like they're going to be standing in somebody's grain field fighting, destroying somebody's crop in the process. I mean, cattle and sheep basically eat grass. Sheep eat more kinds of weeds. Cattle eat other kinds of weeds. Neither one of them eat woody plants or really tough weeds. And, you know, it's somewhat just a mowed field because the animals keep it cropped short. It's a good place to fight. Verse 27. When David came to Mahanaim, Shobi son of Nahash of Rabbah of the Ammonites, and Michir son of Amiel of Lodebar, and Barzillai the Gileadite from Rogelim brought bedding and bowls and articles of pottery. They also brought wheat and barley, flour and roasted grain, beans and lentils, honey and curd, sheep and curds from cow's milk for David and his people to eat. For they said, the people have become hungry and tired and thirsty in the desert. So his allies bring him supplies. Every army has to have a supply chain. And they are from the local area. They are from the surrounding area. And they are providing local produce. And they're providing things that it takes to support people. And they're providing things that they have in abundance. You don't see anything real fancy here. But you see things they have. And they provide them. And if David wins the war, they're going to get a better political position. And besides, they're local. And these are all wealthy men. They have to spare. It's not like they're reaching into their larder and going, I hope I have enough to last. No, they're reaching into their surplus and going, well, I won't make as large a profit this year. And if David wins, because he has the supplies it takes to keep his army going, they know next year, having king's favor, I'll do better. And 5 years from now, I'll still be doing better. And 20 years from now, my son will still be doing better. And they're thinking of the long term because they know that David is going to be a much better king than Absalom. You don't see the Gileadites jumping up and supplying Absalom. They're like, I hope you as the king brought your goods with you. They're not even offering to sell him stuff. All these three men are giving David stuff. They're not saying, hey, you know, if you can pay for it, I got some grain for it. No, here, I'm bringing it to you. Also, notice this is largely a fight within the clan of David at the top. Nahash has been mentioned again. He is one of Amasa relatives. The people in the clan are divided, but they're taking sides. Who do we support? And let's face it, they know both of them. Who do we support? Who is going to be in charge is an important characteristic to them. And they know who they want. And they're going to support David because he's going to be better than Absalom. They know Absalom is all about himself and not about the country. David has been ruling concerned about how everybody else fares, knowing that if he takes care of the country will take care of him. And that he will prosper if the country prospers. And he's become a wealthy, powerful man, not because he concerns about his own wealth and power and authority, but because he's concerned about the country. And people are picking sides now. And they're picking sides with the important things. And they're coming in with the excuse of, oh, the people have gotten hungry as they crossed through the desert. But they're bringing the supplies it takes to support an army. And they're being open about it, and here it is. You're going to have to feed your troops. Feed your troops. Holy Father, you are orchestrating this so that it goes the way you meant for it to. Lord, people are organizing themselves to support David, who you mean to win. Lord, we understand you are the Lord of the earth, that kings rise and fall at your command, that rebellions rise and fall at your command. You orchestrate some of the small details, like which advisor gets paid attention to. You organize details such as where the supplies come from and how much they are. And you orchestrate the big things, because the big things rely on the little things. And it didn't look like much, and if the people at the time, if they'd understood it, they wouldn't have been sure how things would have turned out. But you're orchestrating it so David had enough. And you would make sure he won, because he was a man after your own heart. He wasn't sure how things were going to go either. It wasn't a sure thing. It wasn't a slam dunk. But he would know who was loyal to him and who was not, who was actually in rebellion and who was not. And he would give him important information about his country and how it responds. Lord, you were going to keep him in power, and you were going to work out the details of advice, of spy networks, the inflow of information, the flow of food and other materials it would take, the time for David to organize and get his mind together and his troops together and be able to engage in war. You would give good advisors to David and good people that were doing good work. Lord, we thank you for that. We thank you that you blessed David, that you would bring fruition the continuance of his kingdom, and that wise people would sit on his throne after him and rise up a dynasty that would last until your timing, so that you could bring your son into the world as a descendant of David to sit on David's throne. We're looking forward to that time when he will return to earth to rule on David's throne and be an eternal king. Lord, we ask that you would continue to work in history. We look around us and there's wars and there's rumors of wars and there's disasters, and the world looks like it's unsettled. It looks like the forces of evil are sometime prospering and getting the upper hand. It looks like there's corruption even in the forces of good. But Lord, you're orchestrating it all. And in the right time, in the fullness of time, you will bring it to pass just as you have foretold. Lord, have us to trust you. Have us to see how you work in the past and that you work in the details and the big picture both. And you make sure it happens. And have us to trust even when we don't see like David didn't see. Lord, have us to do the part you tell us to do and to do it here and now. In your gracious name, amen. This has been the Wednesday evening Bible study for May 17th, 2023. It has been recorded on Sunday, May 14th, 2023. And I'm your host, Frank Reich, Associate Pastor of Family Ministry at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church. We had a good Mother's Day service today. I hope you blessed your mother and encouraged her. This coming week will be an eventful week for our family. We have a lot of celebrating to do between Mother's Day and next weekend. And next Sunday, we start the power session for VBS, and we start getting prepared for VBS in a big way. I'm looking forward to that. And so you have a blessed week. I hope to see you Wednesday night at the Bible study. If not, I hope to see you Sunday at church. And if not, I'll see you here on YouTube. Have a blessed week.